this is a serious matter, not just for these two guys, but for the university. I mean, the university as an institution, because the university is the place where public controversy really has to be able to take place. I've read all the blogs, I saw things on YouTube, I went back and read the article again and so on, and I just became more and more convinced that this was a serious issue. For me, it's also a serious issue in another way. I've been coming to Australia now for about 15 years, quite often in the last 10. And frankly, and my wife works in a university here, and frankly, I'm a little worried about the state of Australian universities. And this seemed to me to be a real danger, perhaps a danger to every academic, but certainly a danger in this context. What seems to me to have happened to Australian universities over the last decade, as far as I can tell, is that power is more and more concentrated in the hands of upper administration. I mean, at a place like UCLA, we have what's called shared governance. That is, the faculty and the administration share the governing of the university. And it's very difficult for an administrator to do anything that's not purely administrative without faculty consultation and consent. Here, more and more, vice chancellors are doing just whatever they please, how they please, right? And, you know, Lord Acton was right. Power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And what we're seeing, I think, in this case, but perhaps even more generally, is vice chancellors have power, and occasionally they're going to do something really egregious. And this is something really egregious. It also, in a way, sets a precedent. I mean, if a vice chancellor can suspend two people for 6 months without pay. I mean, these are working stiffs, right? Guys who make a living this way, for speaking out. Well, then anyone who's going to speak out has got to think, look, can I afford this? Can I risk it? And that puts the university in peril, because the university is a place where people should be speaking out. What they were trying to do was to persuade first the student, then the university, and finally all the rest of us that this project shouldn't go ahead, right? They weren't trying to say, you know, this guy shouldn't continue with his life or his work, or even that he wasn't doing in other contexts great work. They were focused on this project, and they thought that this project was really going to harm people. Now, it seems to me when somebody thinks that something's really going to harm someone, they've got a duty to speak out, not just a right, but a duty. And had they been entirely successful here, all they would have done is refocus this project. And so I mean, they weren't out, as far as I can tell, to harm anyone. They were out simply to change the focus, or perhaps refocus completely a project. What's the result? They have been seriously harmed. And a message has been sent to the entire academic community that if you try to do what you think is necessary in these cases, you may be seriously harmed, that you can't buck City Hall, so to speak. And that's what a university is for. It's bucking City Hall. I mean, we're taught to think critically about things. That's what I do in my classroom. That's what any serious academic does in his classroom or her classroom, right? So if we don't do it, then we're failing in our responsibility. And if we have to be looking over our shoulders constantly when we do it, then it's quite frightening. I mean, the university is a privileged and protected space, right? There are things that should be allowed to happen in a university that wouldn't be allowed to happen outside. But this is a very weird case, because, you know, as far as I can tell, the Australian had no legal or moral difficulty publishing this article. It's not like there's some barrier under Australian law to publishing it, right? So what it seems is happening is that things that are perfectly legitimate in the public space are now not being allowed in the university. And that's exactly the opposite of what you'd expect, right? You'd expect people to be able to try out things in a university they wouldn't be able to try out in a public space, rather than the other way around. So as I understand it, part of the worry here is that these guys have gone public with this. But that's, I mean, my understanding of what happened is they tried to get the university to do something about this project, which they thought was really going to harm people, and that's a separate issue, right? Whether they're right about that, but they really genuinely, honestly thought so. They tried to get the university to do something about it. The university wouldn't have a bar of it, so they went public. Well, I mean, they have a perfect right to go public, right? I mean, it's a perfectly sensible thing to do, maybe even their duty to do it. Now look, I mean, as I understand the worry here for the other side, it's that by going public, this would somehow damage the PhD student's future or career, and that I don't see. I've read the article very carefully now several times, and it seems to me there is no attack on the PhD student in the article. The claim is made that the PhD student has a misguided project and that his committee and those who permitted the project to go forward should be held responsible for the misguidedness. The student is not to be held responsible, if I understand that article. Well, these guys are grown-ups, right? I mean, his supervisor, his committee, the ethics people, these are not powerless folk. These are grown-ups. In fact, as far as I can tell, far more powerful than the people objecting. And you know, I mean, if you think a colleague is doing something silly, they're not doing anything wrong by simply saying, look, this is really ridiculous and silly and wrong. And in fact, as I say, a university is the venue in which you'd expect this kind of thing to happen. And if you have to take it public, well, you have to take it public, that's all. There might be a case to be made that you've broken some procedural, you know, that you haven't followed some set of procedures. This often happens in a university, right? I mean, you know, as I say, I was chair. I'm sure I've made mistakes like that. My colleagues certainly did. And you know, you talk to them. You say, look, this is you know, you've done something silly. You might even ask them to apologize. You warn them about whether they should do it again. You don't suspend them, for God's sake. I mean, that's ridiculous. I'm not sure that I would agree with Gary and John about the merits of this particular project, right? I didn't see the film. I don't know Gary and John from a bar of soap. I've never met either of them. I've only had one phone conversation actually with each, right? Since I became so concerned about this. It could well be, for all I know, that this project explores a very delicate and difficult issue about when it's appropriate to laugh at, when it's appropriate to laugh with, and what it is to laugh at and laugh with. Okay, let me say that at the beginning. Now look, laughter is a very important part of human life, right? In fact, the medievals used to say that what distinguished us from animals was our rationality, and that our rationality was manifested precisely in our capacity for laughter. What's the function of laughter in human life? Well, one key function, I think it is to level power. We laugh at the powerful, and in laughing at the powerful, we, to some extent, redress their power by making them seem, and therefore making us behave with respect to them, less powerful than they are. Right? Okay, now, when you laugh at people who are powerless, then you, to some extent, disempower them further. And that, of course, is, I presume, what McLennan and Hookham were worried about, that here you've got a community that's already largely disempowered, and that the project, as they saw it, was going to disempower this community further. Now, I don't know, of course, whether this project really would do that, because I wasn't there, but certainly if you thought that that was going to happen, you would think that laughter wasn't being properly used here, right? That there was a serious ethical issue. When something like this is done, one should always wonder, look, why is it being done? Why are these guys being suspended for 6 months? That is, you know, being basically deprived of half a year's pay and access to their students and God knows what else, for what looks to be a very, you know, for what actually even at on the worst kind of construal would be a very minor thing, and on a better construal would be for something that they really ought to do. And one can't help but suspect that, you know, there's a deeper issue here, that these guys are being picked on for some reason. And of course that again is something that a university administration in particular should be very careful about, right? I mean, should bend over backwards to avoid doing.
What do you think this does for the reputation of the university concern for QUT?
Well, it makes it look like a Mickey Mouse place, right? I mean, what else can you say? In North America, when this kind of thing goes on, it goes on at tiny backwoods colleges that people scorn, right? So I don't know the Australian context as well, but it certainly can't make this place look like a major like a major league place, that's all.